Hi, I'm Luke Hindmarsh,
And I'm Damien Humphreys,
and we're,
in deep crit.
particularly this morning. So today we're going to be dealing with the new optional class features from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, looking at Dungeons and Dragons again. And we were going to kick off with the Artificer, but in fact there aren't any optional class features for the Artificer. It's a reintroduction to that class for some, drawing on what was already established in Eberron. So we're going to kick off looking at the Barbarian.
With each class, you get class features at various levels, and there are some new ones introduced in Tasha's. For the Barbarian, we have at 3rd level a feature called Primal Knowledge, which you get at 3rd and 10th level, and you can gain proficiency in one skill of your choice from that original list of skills available to Barbarians at 1st level. And then the 7th level feature that you're going to get as an optional extra is Instinctive Pounce. And this allows you to, as part of your bonus action when you first enter your rage, you can move up to half your speed as part of that bonus action. What thoughts do you have on those, Luke?
Well, it's very nice to see a bit of broadening of the utility of the Barbarian. It's too easy to fall into the trap of seeing them as just a combat character. And so having an extra skill can help you sort of bridge that gap to have some more usefulness outside combat, I think, and it's pretty sweet. I can't see any problem with a little bit of extra adaptability. What about you, Damien? Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Versatility is kind of a watchword within Tasha's, I feel, and this makes your Barbarian a little more versatile, a little more able to contribute outside of hitting things with a really big axe. I like the Instinctive Pounce.
Yeah.
I can't see many problems with that, apart from maybe outrunning your coverage as you charge into combat. A clever DM may exploit that once or twice, I think.
I think it's got some nice synergy with some of the subclass abilities, particularly if you're doing something like, I don't know, Ancestral Guardians, getting in, striking, and increasing your speed. So you strike the opponent, hopefully, they get disadvantage against everyone but you, and then you move out of their easy range. So there's some nice tactical advantages, but as you say, a cunning DM, I'm speaking to one, would find ways of exploiting that to teach the Barbarian a lesson, if that's possible.
If that's possible, yeah. So that is the two new optional features introduced for the Barbarian in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything.
Next, we're looking at the Bard optional class features. And first off, at first level, there are additional Bard spells, and of course those recur throughout the spell levels from 1st to 9th for the Bard. We're not going to go into in depth what those spells are. Now, when we do our videos on the Bard class, we're going to do a complete Bard spell list and talk about these additions from Tasha's as part of that. The next feature is Magical Inspiration, which means that the Bardic Inspiration die can be used by a spellcaster, for example, to add hit points or damage to a roll. And that, of course, is then used up once they've done so. Next is Bardic Versatility, which is whenever you reach one of the ability score improvement levels, you can replace one of the skills you chose for your expertise feature with one of your other skill proficiencies that isn't benefiting from expertise, so switching expertise in effect, or replace a cantrip with something else from your Bard spell list, cantrip from the Bard spell list. What do you think about these, Amy?
I think they're all pretty good. You know, these are again optional features that every Bard gets. There's no sacrifice needed for them. Additional spells is always useful, as you said. We'll kind of pick our favourites when we do our guide to the Bard classes. But I think there's some good additions in there. The addition of Aid and Mass Healing Word and Hero's Feast are particularly nice, I think, for a utility Bard. Prismatic Wall, the more people that can cast Prismatic Wall, the better, in my opinion, as a player.
Yeah, they're quite thematic, some of these new spells, which is nice, and a bit surprising that they weren't bard spells to start with. But anyway,
Some of them, yeah.
Magical Inspiration. Magical Inspiration. That's a nice expansion, isn't it? From what previously you could only use it on, what is it? Attack rolls, ability checks, and saving throws, if I'm right. So this is a nice expansion. So you're not just spamming inspiration on one character type.
Yeah, it gives more versatility for that inspiration die. So you can give that inspiration to your cleric or your other healer, who can then use that die to restore additional hit points on a cure wounds or a healing word, which is going to be useful, I think, in clutch situations. The bit I like is adding it to the damage for a target affected by that spell. Obviously, not all wizard spells involve an attack roll. Some of them involve a saving throw on behalf of the target. So you can throw your fireball and then add additional damage, but just to one target of that spell. It doesn't apply to all targets of that spell. Right. So that's something to be aware of. If I'm throwing a fireball at a room full of goblins and there's one hobgoblin leading them, I want to kind of add that extra damage to the bigger target, but it doesn't apply to all of the targets.
It keeps it nice and balanced, I think, rather than, because otherwise it could become a bit OP on something like fireball.
Yeah, otherwise you're doing 8d6 plus a d8 damage to everything. Possibly a d10 and so on.
Yeah. Bardic versatilities. I think we both agree that the versatility features that all of these classes have, or most of them have, in Tasha's is a great thing. Any particular comments on this one?
Yeah, I think it's good. There's not much really to go into. You can swap a skill that you have expertise in for another one. Very nice, as the needs of the campaign changes. And you can only do it when you get an ability score improvement. So that's levels 4, 8, 12, 16 and 19. So it's not like you can change it all the time. And the same with the cantrips. A cantrip that would be useful in the first stage of the game and in the first tier of the game might not be useful by the time you hit tier 3 of the game.
Yeah, quite. From a DM perspective, would you want a player to have a roleplay reason for the change? Or, if you were using this, he asks, thinking, I've got a character in one of your campaigns.
I'd like them to, I guess. What's the reason you're changing that expertise? Is that a skill that you're using more, and the one you're swapping out for is one that you're using less? Absolutely, that gives a... rules as written, there doesn't need to be a roleplay reason. But
it's all about the flavour, though, sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes it's about the role-playing, So I would, as a DM, I would say, well, but what's your justification? What's your reasoning behind that? Justification might be a bit of a strong word.
Cool. So that's the Bard, and we'll move on.
And the next class we have with optional features is the Cleric. So at first level you will get additional Cleric spells. This is kind of a theme with all of the spellcasters in Tasha's, is an expanded spell list. Again, when we do our breakdown of the Cleric class, we will go through some of the tastier options on here and provide you with a full Cleric spell list. The second level feature that you're going to get as an optional feature for the Cleric is Harness Divine Power, whereby you can expend a use of your Channel Divinity, and as a bonus action, you can regain one expended spell slot, the level of which can be no higher than your proficiency bonus. And you can do that at second level once, 6th level you get 2 uses, and at 18th level you'll get 3 uses of that, which all regenerate on a long rest. The third feature that you get is Cantrip Versatility. Whenever you reach a level in this class that grants the ability score improvement feature, you can replace a cantrip that you learned with another cantrip from the Cleric spell list. And finally, at 8th level, Blessed Strikes. And this, if you take it, actually replaces either Divine Strike or Potent Spellcasting, whichever one of those you've got from your domain choice. And when a creature takes damage from one of your cantrips or weapon attacks, you can also deal 1d8 radiant damage to that creature, and you can't use that feature again until the start of your next turn. How are we feeling about these, Luke?
I mean, additional spells. Frankly, none of them are overpowered. None of them are game breaking. At the same time, they add some utility. They're quite flavourful. It's good. I'm not going to pick out any of them specifically at this point. We'll do that. Save that for our detailed analysis. But it's not, as far as I'm concerned, this is a worthwhile addition. I think that's probably my view on all of the spells, to be honest, for every one of these classes. I like Harness Divine Power because it's more than a little bit irritating to be stuck with a channel divinity that you just can't get a use for ages. It makes much more sense to be able to swap it out for, I don't know, a healing spell or something else, something that the party needs in that moment. I like the fact it's a bonus action, but it's not overpowered, I think.
Yeah, I think it's the wizard gets arcane recovery. This is like a very mini version of that, I guess, which you sacrifice another resource for. Yeah, if you haven't had any undead to turn or use of your other channel divinity power, this is quite useful. Again, it's not overpowered because it can be no higher than half your proficiency bonus. So at low levels, you're only going to get one first level spell slot. It's going to be a while before you get one second level spell slot, but that spell slot may be crucial for a certain moment, either in any phase of the game. So I think that's very useful. And cantrip versatility again. Be able to swap out your cantrips as you gain levels for those cantrips that you're no longer using. That for those ones that you are going to use, definitely very useful.
I think with the cleric with cantrip versatility, they're sold slightly shorter than some of the other classes with an equivalent, because all they can do is change the cantrip. Whereas when we looked at the bard, you could see they could also change, their skill expertise, things like that. So I think that's a little bit. It's not as effective as some of the other versatilities, but it's still an option, and I don't think it's problematic in any way.
No, not at all.
Blessed Strikes is an interesting. It might be a bit of a hard choice actually, because Divine Strike, if I remember correctly, that's at 14th level you add 2d8. Normally it's 1d8, then at 8th level it's 1d8, then 2d8 at 14th level.
Yeah.
This doesn't scale, and I think Potent Spellcasting didn't scale, but it allowed you to add your Wisdom modifier.
That's right.
Correct.
Yeah. So it's a bit of half a dozen of one, six of the other.
It's balanced.
Yeah, and at lower levels with the potent spellcasting or with the blessed strike, I think you're going to get more bang for your buck than you would from potent spellcasting. If you're starting with a wisdom of 16 or 18, an extra 3 or 4 damage is nice, guaranteed every time. But a D8, okay, there's a random element, but an extra 6, 7, or 8 damage is even nicer. So
absolutely.
I think there's a reasonable payoff there.
Are you playing it safe? Are you taking the gamble? It depends on, I suppose, if you're looking at builds, it depends on how you're playing. I prefer to think of what's my cleric's tactic, and if I am someone who's going to be sort of supporting the front line or maybe even on the front line, different features here. I don't know. I like the versatility of it. I probably make the sacrifice, mostly because I don't survive to 14th level very often.
This is true.
Next up, we have the Druid, and at first level, the Druids are going to get additional spells, much like all of the spellcasting classes. And here again, we've got a nice selection. We're not going to dive in deep to that now, but it's a nice broad range. I think Druids do quite well out of this. Next, we've got Wild Companion. That's a second level Druid feature where you can swap one of your wild shapes to effectively cast Find Familiar temporarily. It's not a Find Familiar that lasts as long as the wizard spell, and you do that without material components, and that lasts as long as a number of hours equal to half your Druid level. Finally, we have that cantrip versatility for Druids, again where you get to change the cantrips that you selected whenever you get an ability score improvement feature level. Damien, thoughts?
Yeah, again, as you said, the Druid does quite well out of the expanded spell list. There's some nice additions there. I'm not gonna, we're not going to sit and discuss them all, but they get a couple of the new summon spells that are available in Tasha's, and yeah, some Revivify is a nice addition to their list, for example. So there's some good additions there. The Wild Companion feature I like. I'm not sure how. I mean, we've talked about this. I'm not sure how often you'd use that over just wild shaping into the form that would be most convenient anyway. One thing I have noticed, having a read through and looking back over the original Druid entry, and I don't know if this is going to be errated or not, but in the player's handbook for wild shape, you can wild shape for a number of hours equal to your Druid level rounded down. So at third level, that would be an hour. The wording on this is that the familiar disappears after a number of hours equal to half your Druid level. So to me, that would suggest at third level that familiar would be around for an hour and a half.
You get an extra half hour.
Yeah. So you get an extra half hour at the odd levels. I don't know if that's intentional, if it might be errated in the future. But at the moment, you get an extra half hour out of having this familiar than you would from wild shaping, which I guess situationally could be advantageous.
I love familiars. I think they're fantastic and really good for utility.
Yeah.
But if they'd have done this as you get to cast Find Familiar the spell, then I'd have thought this was brilliant. I think it's a bit underwhelming because it's temporary. So, as a druid, I don't think I would use this very often. But having the option's nice. Don't have to use it. I've seen someone suggest online that you have to be a druid who either uses this or uses your wild shape, and so you become a wild companion druid or a wild shape druid, and that's just not right. Very clearly from this, it's an option you can sacrifice a wild shape for, not always.
Absolutely. There's no sacrifice in having the ability.
No,
you're not losing anything from it.
Cantrip versatility. There's much to say about that, really, is it? It's what we've said about every versatility.
Yeah, it's nice to have that versatility to swap your cantrips out as and when needed. Again, I don't think the druids get a great selection of cantrips compared to some other classes, but versatility is nice.
I suppose one of the things these cantrip versatilities might be for is if there's optional new cantrips that are released in the future and you're playing a long-term character and you'd love to use them, or even the ones in Tasha's. I'm not off the top of my head thinking of any that the druids get, but there's that as well. There's obviously a feature to making a character last longer.
Yeah, or if you're playing in a homebrew campaign and the DMs come up with their own homebrew cantrips. Absolutely, there's oh, I'd like to take that one instead then, please.
That works.
Yeah. And so the next class that we move on to is the fighter, with some optional features that are presented in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. At first level, you're going to get access to a few new fighting style options. These are blind fighting, interception, superior technique, thrown weapon fighting, and unarmed fighting. We're going to go over these when we do our series of breakdown of all the different classes. So when we do the fighter, we'll go over all of these options in more detail. At fourth level, you'll get martial versatility. So whenever you reach an ASI level in this class, you can do one of the following. You can either replace a fighting style for another fighting style available to fighters. If you know any maneuvers from the Battle Master archetype, you can replace one maneuver with a different maneuver. And then if you have access to maneuvers, there are some new maneuver options available. And obviously you can get these by being the Battle Master or taking the superior technique fighting style or martial adept feat. And these maneuver options are ambush, bait and switch, brace, commanding presence, grappling strike, quick toss, and tactical assessment. And again, we'll go over those in detail when we do our video on fighters. First glance, quick look opinions on those, Luke?
I really like the new fighting style options, although they're not all created equally. Blind fighting, I think, is pretty cool. Whether or not I take that straight off, interception is one I think's pretty poor. Okay, if you can't take feats, can't take sentinel, fair enough. It doesn't thrill me, but I won't go on any more detail than that at this stage. Unless you've got anything you want to say about
No, I think I agree with you on blind fighting. And interception is a poor cousin of a feat that you can take in its place. Superior technique is probably situationally okay, and the others seem more for flavour than they do for mechanics, personally.
I probably agree with that, but we'll do that in more detail, of course, as we've said. Martial versatility is, I mean, it's just the the martial equivalent of cantrip versatility, isn't it? Sort of. I think it's nice. It gives you a chance to change. You had a brilliant example of using, say, the new unarmed fighting style. You might do that if you were in a, or captured in a dungeon or in the Underdark or something, didn't have access to weapons. Might be nice to switch into that for a couple of levels, because let's face it, fighters can pretty much make those changes a lot more than any other class.
Yeah, and I think that that's a fair point to make, is that because it's tied to ability score improvement levels, as a fighter you're going to get those a lot more often than anybody else. So it makes you kind of extra versatile, which is nice. And it's worth pointing out that the swapping maneuvers is if you know any maneuvers from the Battlemaster archetype. So you don't have to be a Battlemaster. You could have gained those from the superior technique fighting style or the martial adept feat.
Indeed.
And you can still change those maneuvers that you know.
The maneuvers themselves, I think these, again, they're not all created equally. Some of them are flavour, some of them are not very good, and some of them are pretty cool. I think some of them are actually potentially... I think DMs need to watch these new maneuvers and be cautious. They're all optional, of course.
Yeah.
And I would be... I'm not saying ban it, but you need to keep an eye on what kind of builds. If you've got a power gamer, this is a power gamer's dream, potentially. Some of them are very powerful, but again, probably quite situationally, and we'll deal with those and analyse them in depth. I like them.
I like them as there being more options. I think more options are always good. Like you say, some of them are better than others. Ones I like off the top of my head are brace and grappling strike. Those are two good ones. But yeah, as you say,
I don't like commanding presence particularly, and I don't like tactical assessment particularly. They're flavour options, I suppose, but they don't fit the fighter in my. Well, let's not be too limited. But we'll talk about them again.
We will talk about.
We'll move
them
on.
Again.
We'll manoeuvre out of this situation.
Indeed.
Flying into view with a nice sideways kick is the monk, and its optional class features are, at second level, dedicated weapon, which allows you to make a simple, so not just simple melee weapon or short sword, a monk weapon. You can, whenever you finish a short or long rest, you can touch a weapon, focus your key on it, and then that becomes a monk weapon until you use the feature again. But the weapon must be simple or martial. You must be proficient with it, and it can't have either the heavy or special properties. Next up, at third level, the monk gains a key fueled attack, which means that if you spend one key point as part of your action on your turn, you can make an attack with an unarmed strike or monk weapon as a bonus action before the end of the turn. So that, in effect, expands your options a little bit. If you're not taking the attack action during your turn, you might be doing one of the other monk abilities. Quickened healing at fourth level allows you to spend 2 key points and roll a martial arts die. You regain a number of hit points equal to the number rolled and your proficiency bonus. And then at fifth level monk feature, you have focused aim, where you can spend between 1 and 3 key points and increase your attack roll by 2 for each of the key points that you spend. And this is interesting because it occurs when you miss with an attack roll. So it's not just when you roll and have to work out, is there a possibility I've not met the AC? This is after you've been told, no, that misses. Damien, what do you think?
Yeah, there's some okay features here. The dedicated weapon it's okay, and it's kind of bounded by that need to be proficient in it. Must be simple or martial. Can't be heavy or have the special properties. So if you've got that longsword proficiency from your character race, then you can use a longsword as a monk weapon.
Yeah.
Does that fit into monks in real life? Probably not. Does that fit into fantasy monks? Yeah, I think it's okay. The key fueled attack, can't really see many uses where you're not going to just take flurry of blows instead. But perhaps if you're one of those subclasses that can do other things with your key, cast a spell, etc., then you at least you have the option of also making an attack as a bonus action, because martial arts and flurry of blows are both tied into taking the attack action first. Quickened healing. It's hard for me to not be rude about this. At least it's free.
And at least it's optional, so you don't have to take it. You don't have to use it.
You don't have to take it, and if you take it, you don't have to use it.
We agree about this one.
Yeah, 2 key points.
I think the word.
Sorry, go on. 2 key points for a D4 plus 2 healing at 5th level is not a worthwhile payoff, in my opinion.
I think we can say that sucks, can't we, on YouTube?
I think that sucks is a yeah.
It'll be bleeped if we're not allowed to say it. I'll bleep it. Well, there we go. Yes. Focused aim. We don't agree about this completely.
Not completely, but you have managed to convince me that it's probably more worthwhile than when I first read it. And that point of when you miss with an attack roll is quite important, because you already know you've missed, so you can then take the option. And if you know you've missed only by a small amount, if you roll an 18 and you're fighting somebody in plate armor, it's a good guess their AC is probably 20. So spend a key point and see if that turns it into a hit. For taking down that large solid opponent, I think it's very useful. It wouldn't be as useful taking down multiple enemies, I think. You'd be better off using flurry of blows.
I see this as a superior version of the Battle Master maneuver precision strike, and because that's also a limited resource like this is, you have to be a cunning player. You have to use it tactically, and if you just go in there and spank out all your key points on making sure all your hits, all your strikes hit, you're misusing it. I agree with you. If you're fighting goblins and using this feature, I mean, you're unlikely to be fighting goblins at 5th level, I suppose, but maybe it's not for fighting a horde of enemies. It's for using tactically against that hard final end of campaign boss or the end of adventure boss or whatever, the hard fight where it's really important you didn't miss. Then it's potentially game changing.
Yeah.
And I think it's potentially the most powerful one of the new options that the one gets.
Yeah, I think so too. So that brings us on to the Paladin, and there's some optional class features available in Tasha's for the Paladin. At 2nd level, you'll get additional Paladin spells. We'll go through these when we do our Paladin video breakdown. There's not that many. Paladin's only being half casters. They only get up to 5th level anyway. There's a couple of okay ones on there. Also at 2nd level, you're going to get some new fighting style options. So when you choose a fighting style, you can choose also, or either Blessed Warrior, Blind Fighting, or Interception. Harness Divine Power is a 3rd level Paladin feature, and this is similar to the Cleric's Harness Divine Power. You can expend a use of your Channel Divinity, and as a bonus action, regain 1 expended spell slot, the level of which can be no higher than half your proficiency bonus, rounded up. The number of times you can use this feature is based on the level you've reached, so at 3rd level you can do it once, 7th level twice, and at 15th level thrice, and you regain all of those uses when you finish a long rest. At 4th level, which is something everybody's getting to one degree or another, at 4th level you get martial versatility. So this is the Paladin's versatility feature. Whenever you reach a level in this class that grants the ability score improvement feature, you can replace a fighting style you know with another fighting style available to paladins. This represents a shift in focus in your martial practice. Over to you, Luke.
The spells are okay. We're not going to go through them. I don't think they're anything super exciting, personally. Fighting, I mean, if you've got a comment on that before I move on to fighting styles.
No, they're thematic and they're okay.
Fighting style options. Blessed Warrior is interesting. It's a bit like you're the player who wanted to be the face of the party, so you chose to be a paladin, and then realised that you wanted to really be a cleric, but didn't have the wisdom for it. So you've got a couple of extra cantrips. It's okay. Blind fighting's interesting, potentially very useful, synergizes with other classes very nicely. Or, I mean, if you're multi-classing to being a warlock, perhaps. Interception is very thematic for a paladin. I still think it's not very good compared to... It's a weak sentinel, isn't it, as we've said, as you said, when we dealt with fighters.
Yeah. I think with the fighting styles, Blessed Warrior is for paladins that can't spell cleric. Blind fighting is it's a nice fighting style option, and I've actually just had a player who's playing a paladin take that as their fighting style in my Icewind Dale campaign, which
where I'm playing a warlock and I'm about to be casting some darkness spells in that paladin's direction.
Yeah, and the whole theme of Icewind Dale is that it's perpetually dark anyway. So that I would think that's a good choice for that player.
Be interesting to see how it plays out.
Would I choose it in other campaigns straight away? Possibly not. Interception. We'll just move on.
And doing so, harnessing divine power. This is like a slightly watered down version of the cleric's harnessing divine power. It's cool. Doesn't leave you stuck with channel divinity, but how does this interact with smite?
So you can get a spell slot back for an extra smite. That's one thing I would say about the expanded spell list for the paladin. Cool, give me more spells. I'm using them all on smites anyway. If you're not smiting, you're not fighting, as you could say. It's okay. It gives you that chance to, as a bonus action, to grab a spell slot back for maybe that crucial last second smite to end a battle. It's okay.
Martial versatility.
You haven't got that many slots anyway. As a paladin, as a half caster, you don't have that many slots anyway, so it's nice to get one back.
Yeah, and it's an optional thing. There's a range of ways you could use this potentially. Martial versatility, I think they've been slightly sold short. Say you took the fighting style Blessed Warrior, you're stuck with those cantrips and you cannot change them. Whereas, if you could have spelt cleric, you could have been able to change your cantrips with cantrip versatility. I think I must say, if I was DMing, I would probably be quite kind on this and say to a paladin, "All right, then I'll let you change your cantrips at your ASI levels. I'll punish them in some other way."
I might argue, as that player, that I'm changing my fighting style from Blessed Warrior with these two cantrips to Blessed Warrior with these two cantrips.
Yeah. That's one way of semi-persuading a DM. Cool. Well, I think it's a slight... There might be an oversight there, but you just rule reasonably, wouldn't you? That's the way to approach it.
Again, versatility is always an added bonus.
And it is all optional, so it's not like, can't be too much complaint about that, I don't think.
I don't think so, no. And there's the Paladin.
And that wraps up part one of our overview of class options within Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Stick around for part two, and if you've enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe. If you haven't liked this video, let us know about that too. But whatever you think about our comments on these class options, we'd love to hear what you have to say in the comments and get the conversation going.